But I'm just going to introduce you to our panel. You've met some of them. We have Charles back to talk to us and Johanna. And Gráinne Mullins is, I suppose, won many accolades and awards for her chocolate company, Grow Chocolate. How many people do you employ now?
18 around peak season.
18! So. Oh my gosh. It started off in a small shed in Galway, didn't it? I think I interviewed you during COVID.
Yeah, you did, absolutely. And I can't believe, started on my parents' kitchen counter and then we converted the shed and now we have our own unit. We're looking for another one again. We're looking to expand and grow. So it's very
unbelievable. Unbelievable. We'll talk a bit more about that. Gareth Mullins is executive chef at Allen Tower, the Marker, Dublin. Again, won lots of awards, very well recognised, very involved in Eurotalk in Ireland. So we'll hear your context from a chef in a hotel group. Also, Nick Lentini at the end there is operations chef. Is that your title? With the Ivy. That's both the Belfast and Dublin.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so we'll be hearing from them as well. And we also have Maurice McGeehan, who is in a very interesting position because he's known as the No Waste Chef on Instagram, and he's also looks after the food and nutrition for the Irish rugby team. Yeah. And it's all very secret because I've tried to interview you, Maurice, for about 3 years. And every time I get on to our rugby union, which is the IRFU, they're like, no, you can't say this and that and the other because it might disturb their campaign for the World Cup. Or honestly, so it's all cloak and daggers. So we want to hear more about that.
Yeah, we have to guard our secrets now.
Yeah, I know. But your whole thing is pack more nutrition in. Yeah. Pack more nutrition in, less waste, more health. And you're dealing with some of the biggest, heaviest top athletes in the world. So I think your take on this will be very, very interesting and relevant. So we're going to kick off. First of all, Gráinne, I might just ask you, because I'll be stepping back and forth, I don't want to be standing in front of people, what's your reactions to what you've heard so far?
I think it's truly inspiring and really important to recognise, I think, the food and the world we're living in at the moment. Even with my chocolates, it's about eating less but better, enjoying the moment, spending the time, embracing the flavours and letting that melt in the palate. I don't want anyone to sit there and eat a box of 10 chocolates, and that resonates. But also I love the thoughts of using sustainable, using Irish ingredients, using what's local to us, cutting down on those travel miles, because we have such amazing flavour profiles like hawthorn. How many of you have actually tasted hawthorn before? But it's literally growing on every hedgerow in Ireland.
Do you use some of them?
So I tap in and out at different times a year. So we've done different collections. I've made lovage chocolates, different things, because I've grown up and my mum has her garden and we use the ingredients directly from the garden. But also I think it's really important to see what flavours we have and look back at our food history as well, because we were foraging seaweeds off the shore, we were making carrageen puddings, we were using flavours that were accessible to us, and we can't lose that. I think it's really important that we don't lose it and retain it, but we can do it while bringing all this extra knowledge into it and at play, because I think naturally if you're using local ingredients, picked them yourself, foraging, finding these ingredients, they will have the medicinal properties, they will be better for you. And there's something I think quite therapeutic about foraging and actually earning your food, appreciating the work that goes into it and not just having everything served to you on a plate.
Yeah, very much so. Gareth, we might go to you, Nick, as well. Well, I'll go to you, Gareth, first. The students outside who are doing the competition today, for example, and I know you have a lot of students coming out to you, they're going to most likely find their career role in a restaurant kitchen. They probably won't be developing their own businesses, or maybe they will be like Gráinne further down the line. You're trying to teach them at the moment and trying to deal with costs and try and turn out a really good plate of food that customers are going to come back to. How do you take any of these messages into that equation? I mean, I know already restaurants are under huge cost pressure and chocolate has obviously rocketed up. So how are you dealing with those challenges?
The one thing that really struck me today was the whole not selling something as being healthy.
Yeah.
I find that really interesting because every time you look at anything now, whether it's, I have a couple of kids, so whether they're searching for healthy food because that's what their social media is telling them and that's what marketing is telling them, and even I work for a hotel brand, we're asked to heavily label the things that consumers eating. So, I mean, if you look back to Ireland a few years ago where we had to list our allergens, now we didn't go and list the allergens in the end. It wasn't, you didn't have to do that, but we would put on whether this dish is a vegan or whether it's perceived to be healthy. Or so I found it really refreshing to hear somebody say, don't tell them it's that, and see where it goes. From a training point of view, from a chef that's coming in, there seems to be this race for young chefs to get to real high levels of success very quickly, but they don't want to learn the fundamentals of whatever part of the kitchen that they're working in, and more importantly, working in all parts in the kitchen. So like really starting your career out and picking an environment where you are going to learn the larder, the garmage, the sauce, the pastry, and taking your time to work your way around the different sections. Because I see, as you know, I judge a lot of competitions.
Yeah.
We introduced a different phase into the competitions a few years ago, where it used to be interview straight to a final, and you would interview this really articulate, very well-read chef, young chef, and then you would bring them to the final, and you'd give them a mystery basket, and they would crash and burn. Like, I mean, really fail. So then we put in a semi-final, and that process, we've kind of weeded out the people that aren't ready. I'm not saying they're not good cooks or they're not good chefs, but to complete, I mean, Gráinne won the competition. To go and win it, you're cooking against the best young chefs in the country, being mentored by the best chefs in the country. So for me, it's always been about finding talent, nurturing them, trying to get them to slow down a little bit. And the narrative for me around kitchens has changed, and I think we need to continue to tell this story that kitchens are really cool places to work. You know, you get to travel the world, you get to really feed your creativity, your love of food. Normally that's what chefs do. And you don't have to work 18 hours a day anymore. And really, we really don't want anybody working 18 hours a day or 15 hours a day. Or like, the goal should be an 8.5 hour or a 10-hour shift. I spoke to someone earlier on, and they're like doing 4 days a week, 10 hours. You'll just get much more out of your people if you do that.
Yeah. And if they're being taught, and I'll ask other people on the panel, is if they're being taught that traditional and almost that French tradition of making desserts, then are you also saying, but it needs to be sustainable, we need to be using less sugar, we need to, like, how do you incorporate that?
But I think to get to what we were looking at, you have to understand the basic principles of cookery. You have to learn the basic principles of cookery. Like, since COVID, I've seen a 50% reduction in people ordering desserts. So there's a...
Why is that, do you think?
Well, I think it comes back to that, like, there's so much guilt being put on you for putting on weight or choosing the wrong thing. It's an easy save of 300 calories at the end, because out there they're telling you to only ingest, if you're a man, 2,500 calories a day, and you've drank 9 glasses of wine in the tasting menu. And you're like, oh, but I'm going to save on the dessert at the end. And I'm like, why don't you skip a glass of wine and have your dessert? Oh, that's one example. And I also think, like, the lunch trade in Ireland has really, really suffered. If you're running a restaurant where your lunch was a big part of your business model, you're probably in big trouble. And the other part, like, our wages have gone up, the commodity has gone up. I've proudly used Valrhona in the hotel since we've opened. We've never used any other chocolate, and I'm having constant conversations with the guys at Odeis, like, the price is going up, the price is going up. And where is the point where you ask somebody, could you imagine paying the same price for a dessert as you paid for a main course? Imagine I priced it the same way I priced my main course.
Well, could we see it going that way? Nick, could you the costs are rising. I think I looked at the CSO figures the other day for food across Ireland. In the last 3 years, the highest 2 percentiles are coffee and chocolate.
Yeah, but if you
Can you see a dessert priced that high, and would people buy it?
If you look in the city centre right now in the restaurants and you look at their starters and desserts, they're not far off in pricing. So you might look at, let's just take the city centre, you'll see some desserts anywhere between 13 to 17 euro.
Yeah.
And then you'll look at the dessert menus and they're anywhere from 11 to 15 euro. So they're kind of very similar in pricing. Now, there's certain restaurants in the city centre like Eto that do their desserts for 7-8 euro, which is incredible value. But majority of the restaurants around Stephen's Green in the city centre are all charging minimum 12 euro. But you know, a lot of people in the industry, startups, and the reason why they close after a year, 2, 3 years is because they're not aware of their costs. They are just purchasing and they don't realize what's going on. I was down, I'm not going to name the person, but I was with a guy last week. I went to sample a product with him and he was using the same oil as me from the same company, same bucket, everything. And he was paying €36 bucket for oil, for 20 litres of oil. And I'm paying €19. So how does that happen? And he's actually using more oil than me a week. So what I did there is I got on to his rep and I said to him, you better reduce the cost of his oil straight away. That is scandalous behaviour. So I think a lot of small companies don't actually realise what they're paying. So even some large companies, I purchase cheaper than them. How does that make sense?
So you have a larger group, don't you?
I have a larger group, but I'm working in the parameters of Ireland as a country, not within the UK. Yes, we have a restaurant estate that might be 130 to 150 restaurants, but still I can't comprehend how I can buy butter, cream, milk cheaper than, let's say, a wholesaler. How does that add up?
Yeah.
Because people aren't going back to the supplier and saying that price isn't right. You know what I mean? So I go direct on a lot of stuff. So I might bring in lobster from Canada myself. I might bring in truffles from France or Hungary. So I just cut out the middleman on so many things. And
Okay.
I store all these products in the airport. Yes, it does give me a high holding stock and I have to shift these products, but it's just being aware of your costs. Like, you know, I have a balance on the menu where I have a lot of desserts that can cost me anywhere between €1 to €1.20. And they could be anything from a creme brulee to a sticky toffee pudding. But then if I do anything with chocolate, that dessert is €3, €3.50.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's just it's not saying chocolate is bad or move away from chocolate. It's about getting that balance on your menu. You know, so you know something that Charles says earlier on about sensory analysis. That's, he said, start up in the schools. We actually did that back in Cal Brew Street back 25 years ago. We did sensory analysis and we did aesthetics and all that kind of stuff. And we were very aware of how colours altered people's kind of mindset and how they eat. But like, are we redistributing the products we're using in our kitchen? So like at the end of the day, if a bakery doesn't sell all its bread, what are they doing with that bread? Are they making a dessert with it the next day? Are they making galettes out of it? If we get a tin of chickpeas right now to make a curry, most people strain the liquid and it goes down the sink. But are they using that protein to make meringues, to make soups? Like, you have to use everything you can.
Do you do a lot of that circular stuff in your kitchens?
Yeah, we don't throw out anything really. Like, we would use up a lot of stuff. So, for example, bread at the end of the day that's been baked that day, that can go into sourdough croutons, that can go into a pan grattata, that can go into a garnish on a dish, you know.
Yeah.
I was with the chef up in Belfast yesterday, and we're using scallops, but most people just get rid of the scallop roe.
Yeah.
But we incorporated that into a sauce. You can incorporate it into a powder. The scallop roe is actually the best flavour on the scallop.
Yes.
So, yeah, you just need to be very smart about what you do with your produce and how you redistribute it and reuse. And it's not about like going abroad and sourcing the cheaper stuff. It's just about sourcing. So, and working within the parameters and knowing what you should be paying for everything, because
Yeah.
I don't believe an awful lot of people have an understanding of what they should be paying for their ingredients, and that probably includes people in this room. Like I've had a coffee shop owner with me. She was attending a day out, canopy day, and I says to her, "What are you paying for your coffee?" And she says to me, 29 a kilo. And I says, "Okay, I'm paying €9 a kilo." And she says, "Jesus Christ." And I says, "I'll get you a better deal for your coffee if you want." And then I said to her, "What are you paying for your milk? Where are you getting that from?" I won't name where she's getting it from, but she was paying extortionate money for her milk as well. And I said to her, "You will be out of business soon."
But is that then, I hear what you're saying, right? But is that then at odds with, and Charles, you might answer this question, you've restaurants under pressure, they need to source where they can get it the cheapest. How then do we say, look at that sourcing? Is it ethical? You know, is the coffee at 27 better sourced than the coffee at €9? It probably isn't in that example. It's probably kind of a similar pitch. Of coffee
Yeah,
or similar,
like the sourcing.
How do you then do you think about where it's coming from as well?
I do, and the sourcing can be ethical. So when you look at, say, lobster I bring in from Canada, that is 100% net yield. If you buy lobster, frozen lobster tomorrow in your local fish supplier, it will say 1 kilo on the package. By the time you defrost that will be 600 gram. But you think you've got an incredible deal by buying that lobster for €30 a kilo. But all of a sudden, when you factor in that yield, what price does your lobster become? Because it's full of water weight. So sourcing is crucial.
Yeah, and knowledge around that.
And
Charlotte,
knowledge around it.
How do you deal with the price? How do we deal with the price issue? Because obviously all around the world, restaurants are having this challenge of massive inflation on ingredient price.
Yeah, well, I think it really depends on the context, right? And then we also need to pick our battles, right? There's a battle for the everyday coffee, and there's a battle for specialty coffee, and there are people who are willing to pay double, maybe triple the amount for a good cup. I'm a part of that. Like I'm a fan of really great coffee, and so, but in that sense, like, what is the context, right? The answer will depend on which fight you decide to pick. If it's accessibility, then right. If it's running 20 cafes versus one cafe, you have a different fight. Depending on where you are in the city, it's a different fight. So it's a very context dependent question. I do think, however, from the design standpoint, what you shared earlier, and we were talking earlier about chocolate formulation. We both kind of have our hands on chocolate products and formulation, and I was sharing just how. We decided with our company Toac in Ecuador to make sure that the inclusions and so the flavorings that we were adding, the ingredients that we were adding, were above what normal inclusion percentage is. Because I wanted people to grab a corner and be like, "Wow, that's intense. It's beautiful. I have another corner and I'll keep the rest of my bar for later," which is similar, right?
Okay, so
that means
the kind of
quality over
delivers.
quantity.
Yeah.
Quality over quantity. And in that sense, the carbon footprint, the cost is much lesser because you are able and you have the knowledge, the education to care about quality, which is not something that we do every day, right? And some people just want, a 50 gram of, bar of chocolate or a 100 gram bar of chocolate will last 2 days, right? But that's the sweet one that's enriched with fats that are sometimes not cacao butter, that have vanillin in it, that have lecithin in it, right? But if you have like pure cacao, it melts differently in the mouth. It's much more intense in the way that you cannot eat that much, right? So I think formulation in that sense and design comes also, well, how do we craft for a human and how do we train a human, looking at the educators in the room, right? The ones that create programs for education. And also, every chef in a kitchen is an educator in a way. Like, how do we train our consumers and the people who are going to be designing foods to just have that sensitivity of, let's craft an experience that people attend to truly, and where with less we get to a better result,
Yeah,
right?
you get more from less
Yeah.
product. Talking about health, Maurice, we might just go to that for an instant and to Johanna as well. Like, how much concentration do you put on the desserts for your players, or in the meals you cook at the moment, at evolving them in terms of along the lines that we're talking about, and using maybe more plant-based materials or less sugar or less fats, or what way do you approach it?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at performance catering, performance nutrition, and general nutrition, it's all about context again. So we would always say, like, okay, high fiber, low in sugar, low in fats is all good. But when you come into performance and you're coming into especially carb loading to build up your glycogen levels before game, which would start probably 3-4 days beforehand. But as you get closer to that game, you actually want to get those refined carbohydrates into you. You want to eliminate the fiber from it. So it's a bit of a contradiction overall.
Right.
So it's all very based on periodic. You're periodizing your foods. So as I said, the carb loading could start 4 days beforehand, and that would be all mapped out all the way up to the time of the game. And then just before, as I said, you want those extra refined carbohydrates that are easily absorbed into the food system as well. So into your blood system, sorry.
And you don't necessarily have clients or people that need to have less fat, less sugar, do you?
Fat's out. Yeah,
Really?
fat's out.
So
fat
why is it out with them?
Fat's out because it'll make you groggy. It'll slow down your metabolism. Same with
Okay.
fiber. So you'll be coming up to that game where you'll be looking at reducing your fiber intake. You'll be actually reducing your fat intake. So game days, you'll be staying away from peanut butters. You'll be staying away from butter, high,
Yeah.
any kind of oils anyway. So
So what do you do with desserts? What fats do you use? In
I actually
desserts?
don't do desserts. We do it once. we actually do it once in a while. But we do use pastry as applications. And so, say for example, post recovery. So we'd be looking at high collagen marshmallows. So you'd be looking at, and everything be measured. So you'd be looking at recovery. You'd be looking at tart cherry jellies. So then you'll be looking at high collagen in those as well. So, and that'll be measured out where tart cherry will be high in antioxidants, and it's really good for anti-inflammatory, and it's really good for sleep for the athletes for that night, so they can get a good sleep for the next day, and especially prevalent in the sevens program because they'll have games back to back. So we could use it for applications that way. High protein brownies as well.
Yeah.
So you'd be cutting out the butter, you're swapping it for, I use rapeseed oil. From me, cold pressed, high in omega, omega
But
3s.
patisserie type desserts, pastry, do they just not eat them?
When
Or
you
is
when
it
you when
your-
you I suppose when you get to elite level, everything's functional, and everything's mapped out, and everything's you have your enjoyment, your days off. You have your pastries and your days off. We do some stuff as well where we do like avocado-based chocolate mousses now and again. When the camps are long, just to kind of break it up, but. When they finish, the first thing they have when they finish is a post-recovery meal.
Yeah.
So that's all about repair, rehydration, and refuel. So you're taking all those factors in there. Now, over a week, say for a week of the Six Nations, the first Monday, maybe Tuesday after the game of the weekend, I'll be focusing on anti-inflammatory. So there'll be anti-inflammatory ingredients going from the morning pre-fuel snack to the
And what
post-training.
sort of ingredients are they for us?
We were looking at cucurum, and it's funny, Charles, your presentation, a lot of tanning ingredients you listed, I use them for anti-inflammatory as well. So you're looking at the green leafies, anything bitter as well. Be looking at cucurum from turmeric, black pepper again to enhance the bioavailability of it. Then we're looking at green leafy veg, loads of different colors with different polyphenols and flavonoids. And then you'll be looking at berries as well, so we get more antioxidants in as well.
Very good. Okay, Johanna, on that note on the health, you're in LA, you say. That's where you're based now, is that right? I know it's health obsessed. Do you see there a lot of people eating like no animal fats, no butters? And what's your message on that? Because we've seen a very vegan swing. We've seen it get less now. I think in Europe, it's leveled out to about 2 to 3% of people. I think the prediction was it was going to be about 10 to 15% of consumers or diners will be vegan about 10 years ago. I think it's settled around 2% maybe. Depends on the country, depends on the wealth of the nation. Obviously enough, the wealthier the nation, the more vegans. But what's your advice to people on fats and animal products in pastry particularly?
Okay, so I feel like many things in your question, but so I live in LA, so of course it's a place, it's a mecca of healthy food, but I have some points to say. Of course, it's very developed, like vegan and gluten-free, very developed, and people are very aware about their wellness. In California, they talk with many people, and they say to me, like 30 years old people, we are very unhealthy. You are French. You are so healthy compared to us. We are aware about that, and we focus on our health. So I'm so happy because I'm in a place that they are aware about food is the fuel of our body, give you the longevity, give you the energy. When I hear the story about sports industry and performance, I used to also work in the industry of sports and also Marcoussis, so the French team of rugby, so I know very well about that. And I have also so many things about to say. But so when I hear that, I'm happy because I can see in some places in the world, in some field, we are aware that food is so important because this is our fuel. This is something that is very important to our health, to have a good energy. Why we have to keep that just secret in a rugby field, or why it has to be just for that people who live in LA. It has to be all around the world. That's consciousness about food. For our health, for our vitality, for our energy is everything. So, of course, just to be general, I want just to, let's say, share that knowledge all around the world and not keeping that on a very small places where I am consulting also sportive and NBA players, rugby. This is a very small place where you can talk about it and try to see what in details what is good for your health to have a better health, more vitality, more energy. Everyone deserves that. Everyone, not only people who have money who live in LA, not just performance like sportive who have the chance to be in the very high level. Everyone deserves that. When I say that, my philosophy is about being aware that we have an amazing product all around us, and it doesn't matter about, I won't stop on vegan or gluten-free or thing like this. I want to say that we have treasure all around us. If we have a look on our local treasure, we need to highlight that in our life. This is so important to bring that to our life, and we need to bring the best. Find the best, source the best. And I am lucky because in LA, they are aware and they are very picky on anything. Still, the sugar is a problem. So they are very in advance about having diversified the fats, diversify the flours, because they are very concerned about the wheats, because it's a big thing over there. So they are in advance. When I see the world, when I go everywhere, they are in advance because they knew they were unhealthy for years and years and years, and they eat very bad things. Still, the sugar. Come on, we are in LA. It's a mecca of healthy sugar. The amount of sugar is crazy.
But that's probably with not an educated class of people. Would that be right? Would the high income and educated people eat quite a very strict diet? But then in your average American diet, as we know, is quite poor and very heavy with sugar.
I think it's a political thing that we need to really break everything all around the world, because the sugar industry really make that big mess. And we need to break that by let people know that we need to focus on low GI, low GI, low GI. This is a big things. Even sportists can have desserts. if it's low GI, because there is no peak, because we look for that. They need glucose, but we don't want them to have a high peak. For kids, it's the same. For everyone, it's the same. So I think right now, I see when I travel around the world, I see it's progressing. It's the people are aware about now gluten. People are aware about vegan, and they try to diversify the origin of the fats. But still, the sugar is a really big problem. So we need to find a way to educate our children, educate the chef, educate the parents to
Eat less refined sugar.
Yes.
Yeah, and use less refined sugar.
and make the like fiber as a Champions League and the good fat as a Champions League. It has to be at the top
Yes.
of our food, and also vegetables, of course, because there's no fiber, and fruits and natural products. And just consider that sugar has to be really reconsidered.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Talking a bit about Ireland, Gráinne, and the place of dessert and pastries and patisserie, because we've seen the handmade chocolates really boom in the last couple of years. There's quite a number of firms doing what you've done very well. But the dessert, it's something we didn't really focus on for a long time. It's often an afterthought in a restaurant setting. Why is that, do you think, and what can we do to change it?
Yeah, I think as a pastry chef, having worked in kitchens, you're kind of forgotten about. You're the last thing that's served. You're not going to get a bit of help. And that can be a challenge. But I think it's really about educating. We've spoken a lot today about educating. It's about educating the general public, but also educating everyone that's on a chef team. Everyone can make a dessert. Yes, it's more precise. Yes, you have to follow a recipe. But it doesn't have to be the classical French style dessert. I love that we're saying that we should maybe not mention the French titles. It's called something. It doesn't have to be a ganache. What English word can we use? What Irish word can we use to describe these things? And I think it's really important to train people, to give them the time to educate up. And no more than Juliette, who's competing with us today, like giving that space for exploration, trialing and testing. One of her desserts is a vegan dessert, and I could give it to anyone in the audience and nobody would know it was vegan. And she trialed it a lot, so we had a lot of these gorgeous desserts and nobody was able to tell that it was any different, but that's because of the excellent work that went in behind it. And developing and understanding and putting that thought process into creating a dessert is really important. It shouldn't be just consuming something sweet just for the sake of it. You want the likes of the medicinals. Like, I love to think maybe not use lemon, try and use an Irish vinegar as your acidity. We don't have to stick to the classical way of looking at things. We can look outside the box. If we need acidity, it doesn't have to be the way we've always done it. We can use a different flavor profile, balance it out, and that within a dessert is going to help to create a different mouthfeel. It's going to make it taste different, and it's going to make it more exciting. I think as well, bringing the important parts of like balancing a dessert. It doesn't just have to be a mousse. What goes in there? Something a bit salty, a little bit sour. That's what's going to get the palate excited. That's what's going to make this taste amazing. You don't just want sugar if you want to taste something truly delicious. But overall, I think it is about like bringing people up, sharing recipes, teaching each other. And that is so important, because if we don't teach the next generation what we've learned, then it's all going to be lost. And I think with chefs, they can often be like, no, it's my recipe. I'm guarding this for myself. I'm going to bring this on. I think forget that. Let's teach, let's educate and bring each other together, because I have got some of my recipes from my first job. They're not the same now. They have evolved. They have developed with my palate, with my education. And that's the way food culture will evolve and develop. We don't want to lose the advancements that we're making. We want to retain them and teach, and hopefully the next generation will only improve on that.
Okay, I'm going to ask Gareth to respond to just a couple of things there, and then we're going to throw it open to some questions, so get your questions together. Gareth, like this idea that in Ireland, like unlike France or unlike Europe, you know, the guys were telling me before, Cyril and Eric, that in France, most patisserie chefs or most pastry chefs are men, number one, which is very different to here. And you go to a special école, like a school, just for that. It's that specialised and it's that esteemed. We don't really esteem it here, do we? And do we need to do that more? And kind of just, like, that's what this conference is about, I suppose, having this discussion about where are we going with pastry and patisserie.
The challenge you have at the moment is that, like, there's such pressure on margins.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about here is applying a hell of a lot of craft to something to make it be really delicious. the pressure on the wage cost at the moment has never been higher. The pressure on commodity has never been higher. I work in the luxury sector.
Yeah, yeah.
And I feel I'm at peak of what I can charge for things. So what my takeaway from today is reducing things, making things a little bit smaller. In my everyday life, if I want something really nice, I save up for it, I wait and I get it, and then I purchase it. And then I own something that's much nicer. I could easily go and buy something that's much cheaper. The fashion industry are dealing with exactly the same prices.
Yeah.
So like, if we are all out there saying, eat less of things that are much better, then everybody is gonna be better off. The locals will be better off. And the conversation, I think, in food at the moment is about looking back to look forward. Like, so when you look back to how our ancestors, in the taxi coming across here, there was the taxi driver was a butcher. And I only figured out he was a butcher because some of the questions that he was asking me.
Okay.
He was asking me like really intricate questions about beef and about other things. And I was like, "You're driving a taxi now." He says, you're from a different industry. He says, "Oh no, I'm from the butcher industry." And he was like, "In America, when I worked over there, a 22-ounce steak was celebrated."
That's big.
Massive. In like the high-end restaurants in New York, like the biggest steak that was out there, were like, if you could sell this big steak, you were kind of put up on a pedestal. Now, there's restaurants in New York now that don't sell steak anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's like a huge step forward.
Yeah.
And then just for a very simple thing, like I'd always have fillet steak on my menu because of the type of client that stay in my hotel.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're also, we always had an 8-ounce. I don't know why I always had it as an 8-ounce steak. I just did. And then I was like, we'll stop cutting the steaks before service and we'll cut them to order. And we'll offer a 6-ounce or an 8-ounce. And I just thought to myself, no one's going to buy the 6-ounce. We don't sell 8-ounce steaks anymore.
Really?
No, I don't know whether it's because of the price or because people are eating less. Now, it's a very high quality piece of beef.
Yeah.
But between our team that on the floor that'll educate and say that the chefs actually cut these to order, there's all of these things that help towards it. But I think
that kind of
narrative,
individualises the experience as well, doesn't it? It's
yeah,
like,
but again, you're leaning back into the labour piece, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, like,
okay.
I think the points that are being made here, it's about really and also the romanticism of just making decisions in a business because they're the right thing to do. Like, the reality is, when you're leading a business, all the decisions that you make are really rooted in the commercial end of it first.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, you take the romantic idea, but then you have to run the numbers on it and make sure that works. So, like, we always have a vegan starter, a vegan main course, and a vegan dessert on our menus. I've 5 different food outlets, and all of them have a vegan starter, main, and dessert. Why is that? Because I was told to do that by the people that I work for. When that first came in, I was like, that's a really bad idea. Why are they making me do this? And then I stepped back from it and was like, no, actually, it's going to challenge us as a brigade to think a little bit differently. And they drive a lot of the sales, especially at lunchtime. The corporate person at lunchtime wants to eat much lighter, much brighter, and much cleaner foods.
Yes.
At dinner, of course, someone wants to sit down and eat a piece of foie gras and drink a glass of sauterne. You'd never sell it to them at lunchtime. And I think it's the same thing with desserts. Like, it's about educating to get people that it doesn't. I love the fact that the dessert doesn't have to be a treat. It's a way of finishing a meal really beautifully.
Yeah.
Bit of experience. Generally, it's going to hurt me to say this, but the most amount of craft is a lot of the time in the pastry corner. I'm smiling because a lot of my pastry chef friends are in the room, and I would have a constant bit of crack with them that you think is are the artists, and you know, like where you think the larder chef isn't as technical when sometimes they are. But generally, in the pastry corner, you're spending a lot of your money. You pay more money to your head pastry chef.
Okay.
Your chef de partie in the pastry generally will demand a little bit more money because there's a little bit more craft and skill involved, and that's okay. Yeah, we don't charge the most amount of money for the dessert.
No. And in Ireland, I don't think we value them. Just,
No,
you know,
I would
from a
disagree with
dining
that.
sense.
I would disagree with that because what I've seen in my career, the pastry corner help with staff retention. Because when you have a commis chef that's worked in the larder, they've worked on the garnish, they've worked on the meat, they've worked on the fish, and you're about to lose them out into the world, you say, but hold on, you haven't actually worked in the pastry corner. And because I have a pastry where we make our own bread every day, we make all our own ice creams, we make all our own desserts, I get them for another 12 months, and then they leave me as a hopefully as a rounded
Yeah.
craft person, and they either stay and want to become a sous chef with you, or they take the step to the next part of their career. But I
Okay.
think that in the luxury sector, people really understand that if you have a proper pastry corner in your kitchen, then it's going to benefit your brigade. The Excel warriors or the accountants,
Next up.
they'll have something else to say. They'll be like, but you can buy it in a box.
Yeah, you
all
can
you
buy.
have to do is heat it up.
And it's so frequently bought in.
But then it's people that it does my job that's at the top to give to the narrative, which are human resources department or your people and culture department, to say, no, I have high staff retention because I run a full training system across all parts of the being a chef, not just starters, not just mains, not just desserts.
And you can see
so
that.
that would be my argument.
Yeah, when you eat in your restaurants, you can see that quality. Like it comes through. Questions from the floor? You educators and tutors out there or chefs? Anyone got a question for our panel? No, they're very cautious. There's some. Yes, shout out. Actually, you're okay. We probably don't need a mic. Say that again a bit louder.
Just in terms of education for young chefs, would you see like an apprenticeship coming down the line?
The apprenticeship programs are back up and running.
Yeah.
And you are, like, the challenge you have from a business, running the business, is that you have to release that person from your employment for a couple of days. So it's really about getting the buy-in from the organisation that you work for. I mean, I'm a little bit lucky. I have 30-odd chefs that work for me along with my steward in the department. If you were running a small restaurant with 5 chefs, letting one of them go for 2 days a week. So then there has to be the buy-in in the business model to say, well, actually, instead of having 4 chefs, we need to have 4.5 chefs, and we're going to commit to sending one of those chefs away for 2 days, and it really works. If you look into mechanics, carpenters, plumbers, bricklayers, electricians, I could go on and on and on, they commit to block release programs, day release programs. When I trained all those years ago, I was in a day release program where I went to college. I actually went on my day off, but you couldn't do that now. But there is young chefs that will say to you, "Oh, I'll go on my day off," and I'll be like, "No, it's part of your work," and you send them to college. So I would love to see, and being in a facility like I'm in today, these apprentice programs come back in, because we are a craft at the end of the day. So it's really lovely when they're getting classroom-based knowledge and then coming into a working environment where they can put those skills to the test, where things are being made and the accountants are not telling you to just buy everything. I know I'm joking about it, but that is what happens. So, yeah, I hope that answers
We don't know what they're doing in the colleges anymore, though. That's a big problem. Like, when I went to college, you did one thing one week, and then you went on to the next thing, and then the next thing, and all of a sudden you were doing Japanese, Indian, blah, blah, blah. But they never taught us the basics week after week after week in college, like your mother sauces, your basics and then go out into the industry and learn it. It was, so you're going to college. The whole point of what the lady up the top said about apprentice is that apprentices are doing the basics, but in colleges we weren't doing the basics. We were getting a taste of it, and then we were jumping on to the next thing, steps way ahead of where we should be. So I don't even know. I can't speak for colleges right now, by the way. Maybe they've changed the program. I went into the college about 5 years ago and told him he should change the program, and he looked at me like he just wanted to throw me out on the road. But
does there need to be more communication then? Because this is what we're discussing from the industry, not just about pastry chefs with education. You know, does there need to be more connections there? There probably does. But looking back now, I wish I travelled an awful lot, but I wish I had just gone to London and spent a couple of years over there and forgot about the whole college thing and did what I loved and learned my craft solid. Now, college did have its good moments, but yeah, I don't know. I don't think the program is right in our country in colleges.
I would wholeheartedly disagree with that approach from business leaders. I think we have to embrace the colleges, and really the idea of giving people snippets of what's going on is that they learn at industry level. And like, to me, there is a culture that chefs want to move around a lot and I understand it.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think if you're early in your career, if you can get yourself into a kitchen, be it in London or Dublin or Zimbabwe, wherever you are, that you get into a kitchen that's doing the principles of cookery correctly. And then as your career goes on a little bit, you might go into a more of a fine dining kitchen. I can see Kevin Thornton sitting up there, and I know loads of lads that have worked for them and they've worked for me, and where you go in and you learn how to break the whole animal. You might have just learned that in theory in college, because the reality is, the commercial reality of getting a whole cow or a whole lamb or a whole pig into a
That's
college
not
doesn't always add
doable.
up.
Yes,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's really about learning what I think college is about, is learning the principles of cookery correctly, getting a little bit of exposure to that from a practical point of view, and then backing it up in a craft forward kitchen, which is the one that I'd like to try and run and have been working and running for my whole career, and then diversify into different sectors. So whether it's Japanese or a Scandi type kitchen where like fermentation is really heavy. I don't do a lot of fermentation cookery. I don't know a lot about it. Sometimes I get a chef that knows about it, and we all learn from that person, and we introduce it a little bit. So I got a little tired of the narrative saying that the colleges aren't correct, and I don't know.
Gareth, I can only go by my example. I went through with 48 students over a 5-year period from diploma to degree, and only 2 of those people are chefs.
The same thing happens with mechanics.
But what is there not something wrong?
Bricklayers.
Is there not something wrong in the colleges? Because
Possibly.
I have people coming out of colleges that don't even know how to make a beef stock.
Possibly,
And they've been there for 5 years. So,
Annette, can I bring
so
in
what's
Annette,
going on?
Annette here, you're a tutor, senior tutor in TU Dublin. What's your view?
Just on the topic of thanks, Charles. Thank you. So just on the topic of today's conference, it's really about deconstructing nutrition. And if we're looking at training of young chefs, nutrition has to be a pillar, and it is a pillar in our programs across TU and other colleges as well. But not only that, I mean, what Charles talked about there, first of all, not labelling things as vegan or plant-based. That's called, what we would use in our programs is healthful menu design. So the entire menu is a healthful menu, and it's designed with nutrition as a pillar, as well as the skills and flavour, but also the student has the understanding of how to do that. And a really important point going forward, and we know this from FSCI, the task force, there's a reformulation task force there. That is the future. That's the farm to fork strategy coming from the EU, that we have to be reformulating these classical recipes. We have to be doing that for health. The other thing that we need to bear in mind is the trend in health and Ozempic and how it's impacting the restaurant industry in New York already. That's going to come here too, and that nutrient dense that Charles talked about. But that flavour focus. So we would have a master's for training chefs that are out there and in applied culinary nutrition that incorporates the gastrophysics, which my colleague Vernon teaches, and also the applied culinary nutrition piece. And to do this in a very experimental environment, but also very grounded in science. So the colleges are doing a lot, and nutrition is really a serious pillar now in a lot of culinary programs. And that's really what today is about. And that's how we move forward. And that is the future, whether it's pastry, whether it's hot kitchen, or any aspect of kitchen, botanical or whatever. That's where we're going. Yeah. And it's great to have Charles as one of our I suppose, patrons on the programme.
Yeah, because he's involved in the programme here,
Yeah.
aren't you? I'd just like to bring it back to, before we leave restaurants, because I want to get 1 or 2 questions on other topics. In terms of like the challenges that the lads have running restaurant kitchens, and Gráinne has, and everybody running a commercial kitchen with cost, how can they bring in these ideas about sourcing if it's really so price-based where everybody is at the moment, and the wage bill is colossal and your supplier bill is colossal? How do you juggle it?
Yeah, well, I want to invite everybody actually to take 2 steps back or zoom out. When we talk about cost of food, we're not talking about the real cost of food in most cases. And we've created a lot of habits that might be pleasurable, might be culturally relevant, but that we cannot sustain in the long term. And there's a thing is that the food that we're mostly talking about here is not democratically accessible, right? Talking about any aspect of evolution in food and the craft needs to go with understanding that we're part of a very complex food system that is very flawed from an economical standpoint and from an agricultural standpoint. That's kind of a starting point that I feel like we must not forget within these conversations. Where do we go from now? That's the question where I think it's calling in like a multidisciplinary, everybody, all hands on deck. How can we craft a better food system? I do think, like we're talking about food in colleges or food education, I think that food should be taught from age 4 at schools, right? Like if in 5 decades from now, every single human being gets the basic of education, we'll have a different level at 18 years old to go in college and to go and teach like deeper technique, right? And knowing what a stock, let's not call it beef, but like any type of stock and extraction, very simple chemistry and physics, very simple, cultural background and historical background. And you can make any stock age 16 because that's something that every human being should potentially know. That is, I think, we cannot talk about food systems transformation without talking about food justice. And I think we cannot, there it goes political very quickly, right? And so I do think that there needs to be like a political will to take food more seriously and not just see it as a commodity. When we do that, there's a different mindset to think about the kitchen as the place where we connect nature and culture, right? That's the touch point between agriculture and culture. And it's fundamental for human life, and it's fundamental for our future. So the kitchen is the most alchemical space, right? It's the only place where all the 5 elements are at play, right? Fire and earth and water and air. There's a poetry to that as well, right? That I'm clearly kind of putting forward here. But the point being that it's a strategic place. What about public kitchens? What about public gardens? What about, when I say public kitchens, I mean community kitchens. Places where there's social cohesion, places where there's education. And I don't know, all of these that I'm saying is kind of painting a future, but truly, if you look at it, the blueprint is in our past. Of all this, right? Yeah. And the wise woman and wise man in the community would often be the ones carrying the medicinal knowledge and the food knowledge. It would be the same person in society. The doctor was also the chef, right? And preventative, right? Doctor. And so I think, just the question is so complex that it requires a complex answer. But hopefully, like if we try to think that just taking responsibility for like we have an important role to play in society. We need to think about this, and we need some chefs today that are going to college to the Michelin training, the maybe entrepreneurship and all that, and that in 5 years from now are going to say, "Fuck this, I'm going to go to politics," because we need to really. Right? Apologies for the F word, but I'm very passionate about this. I do think that we need to get into people who know about food into this. Places of power. Ultimately, that's what I think we're missing hugely.
I think a lot of it has to do with the parenting as well. Like my kids forage, they dehydrate mushrooms, they eat mushroom snacks. We eat whipped avocado with cacao and olive oil and salt for our dessert. They know how to make tinctures from mushrooms. They go how to pick berries from trees. So we can all say we have to educate everybody, but it's also up to us as people and parents to teach ourselves and pass that down to our kids as well. Yeah. Because we do all this, like I'm sure Gráinne does, Gareth does, we all do it in our own industries. Like we have a vegan dessert on the menu, but we don't call it vegan. And people just, they eat it and they're like, it's a chocolate cheesecake. And they're like, this is incredible. So we all do our part in the industry. All of us do. Yeah. And I guarantee you everyone does here. We have different opinions, but we can't just keep saying what we have to do, what we have to do. It's the whole community of people, isn't it? It's everybody in one's own role.
Unfortunately, I do think, and it comes back to, Charlie, you'd see this all around the world. Our government is very unmotivated about those kind of community initiatives in food. They're happening in a small way, usually with charities and NGOs around the country who have community gardens, who are doing courses for children. But to extrapolate that out to public policy, I mean, we've been looking for education on food in primary schools for probably 20 years here, and it really hasn't happened. It barely happens in secondary school. But I know that there's a bigger push. There's more voices talking about it now, and there's more awareness of it, and events like this, you know, help spread that awareness. Have we any questions before we kind of wrap this up anymore? Okay, we've 2 more speakers later on. Loads to think about there. We'll solve all the world's problems over lunch. And then come back in and enjoy some more. So please give our panelists a big round of applause and see you afterwards.